Well, I agree with Attorney Mike, and I want to go back to what I believe is one of the most important pieces to this, and that's the parenting. As Mike said, it should start at home. The parents, including myself, we have to take a better responsibility at raising our kids, and even after our kids reach the age of 18, 19, 20, and they're off to college, we still have to be a parent. If we were to instill some of the same things that my parents instilled back in let's put it this way, I don't want to tell my age, but let's just say when I was a kid, I think some of the behavior problems that we have right now with young black males in particular, we wouldn't have some of those issues that we deal with. The other thing that I like to talk about is in our community, sometimes we promote the wrong things. We're promoting young black men, not all of us, but some of us are promoting young black men being able to walk down the street with their pants hanging off their butt. Now, how important should it be to one to tell somebody else, hey man, that's cool? Now, I'm not going to get into the meaning, what that means, because I do know what that means, but yet and still, some people don't look at that and say, well, you shouldn't do it. The degrading of young black women by young black men. I mean, we can go on and on. I mean, the list goes on and on, but I think, and I'm going to echo again what Attorney Mike said, it starts at home. The parents have to do a better job at parenting. Get these kids away from all these electronics, giving them the privilege to do what they want to do. Listen, when I was being raised, if I thought I was going to raise my eyebrow when my mom asked me to do something, the iron, other objects was coming at me, and they didn't mind that the police might show up at the door because they would tell the police what they did to me. Now, I know we're not going to go back to that, but, that's my take on it. Mark?
I'm going to go back for a second to what Roland mentioned about the changing of the guard in the prison system years and years ago. And one of the things that we have to remember is that technically the legal system, the prison system, parts of our life, is a game. And it's a game that the rules are being written by the wrong people for us. And so every time they see us making advancements, they're going to change the rules. And what, like Mike said, what the parents aren't doing is adjusting to the change. And they need to continually see that these kids, as they grow up, just like every generation, there's a culture of music that the parents don't like. When we all grew up, they didn't like our music. When they grew up, their parents didn't like their music. There's going to be that over and over again. However, there has to be an adjustment. As Skip said, when I grew up, I was afraid of my mom. I wouldn't do anything to think. My mom put soap in my mouth, all these other things that our kids aren't afraid of our parents, a lot of them. My kids are afraid of my parents, of me. Okay, they're definitely afraid of me, as they should be. But most kids aren't afraid of their parents. We've seen it in stores. We've seen kids talk back to their parents. I remember being in college and a kid on the phone talking to his parents, cursing at his parents and telling them what they had to do. And I was like, wow, I could never imagine telling that to my mom. But that's the way the parent allowed it. It's almost like if you had a dog and you let the puppy walk in and never trained it to do what it's supposed to do, where it's supposed to do it, and then 10 years later you look back and your whole house is full of feces, and you're like, I don't understand why this dog won't do what it's supposed to do, because you never trained him. You never told him what he needed to do. But going back to the idea that the prisons, one of the reasons why the prisons changed from 2/3 white to 2/3 black is because they feared us then. And they changed the laws and the rules to incorporate things that we were doing normally to be against them. They did it when Reagan was in office. He came up with this whole say no to drugs and changed the whole dynamic of if you have a joint in your hand, you can go to jail for years and years.
But if the white power.
Right. But if you had a kilo, you could get probation. And obviously, the people that had the kilos were the people that had money and power and getting them directly from them. But the guy who had a little bit in his hand, he just was using. Not rightfully so, as Mike said. But why was he in jail for 10 years with no rehab? But the guy who's providing it for him can never get caught. So we got to remember that it's a game, the rules keep changing. And just going back to the case we're speaking about, in Trayvon Martin's case, as far as I'm looking at it. He's a 17-year-old black kid who did not live in Sanford. You know, Mike talked about the city of Sanford. Trayvon Martin didn't live in Sanford. Trayvon Martin lived in the hood in Miami. And if any of you know about the hood in Miami, it's just as rough as Southeast. It's just as rough as the hoods in New York. It's a rough area. He was responding how he was brought up to respond. And he was in Sanford. Yes, I believe that when authority approaches a child, they should know. But that's the way he was brought up. His parents didn't tell him, hey, like Mike said, when somebody seemingly of authority, you, me, or anybody else wouldn't know that George Zimmerman was of authority. It didn't look like he was authority, but if it's pouring down rain in the middle of the night and somebody stops and says, hey, what are you doing here? Their first reaction for the 17-year-old should not be to run, in my opinion. That's not what you should do. You should say, my daddy lives here, I'm going home. That may or may not prevent this, I'm not saying it would. But for him, the first thing for him to do is start to run and all that. That means that he wasn't, and I love his parents for the strength they have. But it comes back to how they adjusted to the game. I have a 17-year-old son right now, and I've been talking to him about this. Sometimes he surprises me about what he says, positively and negatively. But I can relate if I had that situation with my 17-year-old son. I believe, and I've talked to him about it, so I asked the questions instead of giving him the answers. What would you have done? And he said, I would have stopped and said, I live here. Then he would have ran. But the point is that he at least knew that if a police or somebody of authority seemingly stops you and says, hey, what are you doing here? The first thing for you to run is a sign of guilt, is a sign of you're running from something, as opposed to Trayvon wasn't doing anything. He was walking home. He should have, hopefully it would have been great for him to have known, don't be afraid. I'm not a big fan of the police either. But at the same time, I know, like Mike said, if a police officer pulls me over, that's not from my time to express that sentiment.
Well, if I could just add one more thing to what we're talking about, and it's funny that you guys were talking about the police officer stopping you, because I was just stopped close to where I live in my neighborhood because I was unfortunately coasting a little too fast, and we didn't see the speed trap. By the time I saw the officer, it was too late, and my wife and my sister were with me. He pulled me over. I pulled over. I told them, I said, wow, he got me because I was wrong. So I already knew I was wrong. So when the police officer approached the car, I said, officer, something to the fact that I identified that, I was speeding, I was wrong or something. I gave him my driver's license, gave him the registration, went to his car, came back in about 2 minutes. He said, Mr. Skipper, slow it down, I'm gonna give you a warning. Slow it down. But I agree, before I pass over to Roland, I agree with Mark and Mike. You have to be able to transition into doing the right thing to keep you from being on the